School Building Committee, and I want to thank you for coming out tonight. This is our third public forum in an effort to get out information about the new school building project here in East Hampton. We're taking these opportunities to get out all of the information about our recommended preferred solution, a pre-K through 8 school. This process is intended to be totally transparent so that everyone will have all of the facts about this project. Tonight you will hear the details of the plan, preliminary cost, and preliminary cost to residents to support the project. Again, thank you for your interest and your participation. Nancy?
Thank you, Tom. I have here with me, I'm Nancy Follansby, Superintendent of Schools, and I have Bert Gardner from our design team from Kalo and Beanick, and Mel Overmoyer from one of our owners' project managers, and Dale Doran, Director of Business Services. And I just want to add my thank you to Tom's for coming. We don't have a huge crowd tonight, but we're excited to have you all here. And there'll be ample opportunities for you to ask questions and to get the answers. So we'll go through our program and then give you that opportunity. This is our school building committee. And Tom, did you want to say a little bit about the school building committee?
Sure. Just that Mayor Cadger took the opportunity to get a great cross-section of people on the committee, from the business community, some residents representing the school committee, the school department, fire chief, city councilors, and business people. So she's got a great cross-section, a great committee, and they've been very, very committed to the meetings we've had all along from the beginning. Great attendance at the meetings. So I want to give my personal thanks to all of the committee members that have been very, very deeply involved in the process from day one.
Thank you. So we'll start with the need. Actually, how many of you either have had children in this school or currently have children in this school? Any of you in the audience? Or went to the school, better yet. So those of you who've had children here or went to these schools, you know that we, and our elementary schools, that we have schools that are over 100 years old. All of our elementary schools are over 100 years old. And Whitebrook is 45 years old, and it's was the original open classroom design where for some reason they thought back in that day that having classrooms without walls was a good idea. And of course you can imagine what that's like as a teacher, trying to teach your children in a classroom without any walls. What we have done is put up structures to enclose classrooms, but many of them, they're like dividers and they don't go all the way to the ceiling. So there's a lot of noise still, and sometimes a classroom of students will be walking right by your classroom that's open. So there's a lot of noise and a lot of disruption here at Whitebrook. Whitebrook also is the largest consumer of electricity here in East Hampton. It is a real energy hog, and we're hoping to, with a new building, that we know with a new building, we'll be decreasing that aspect. All 4 buildings were not designed for 21st century learning and teaching, and they do not comply with current building standards and codes. So we just aren't in a place where we can provide that 21st century education to our students. And so those were all of the reasons that we started thinking about putting in a request to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, for a new school building project. And Mel's going to talk a little bit about next about.
So East Hampton's had an interesting history relative to MSBA grant applications. As you probably remember and realize that we built the new high school actually with the same team of folks and opened it in 2013 with the SOI going in, I think, at around 2009, something like that. But since then, actually, the district has also been submitting statements of interest, SOIs, to the MSBA, which is the first step in application for MSBA grants, in 2012, 2013, and 2014. As you may know or may not know, is that MSBA requires that each district choose one building. They will only do one building at a time. They will not fund multiple buildings. However, they will fund consolidation projects. In 2012, 13, and 14, statements of interest were submitted for Whitebrook Middle School because actually the district felt that this building, Whitebrook Middle, was actually in more need, even though it is only 45 years old versus the 3 elementary schools that are over 100 years old. Each year, the Whitebrook Middle School was not selected by the MSBA for their grant program. So in 2014, however, Superintendent Founsby and team submitted actually multiple SOIs, but with the highest priority being one of the elementary schools, in other words, Maple. And MSBA approved it. And frankly, I was at an MSBA meeting where they actually said, you actually have 3 elementary schools that are over 100 years old, and they found that hard to believe, and obviously that's one of the reasons they East Hampton was accepted into the program. As part of that SOI, though, as I mentioned, they will only do one building. So what the MSBA did say, however, is that you could combine the grades in Maple with your other 3 schools, or your other 2 schools, in other words, the 3 elementary schools, or any 2 of them, or for that matter, if you wanted to combine and consolidate into a pre-K to 8 facility, you could do that because it's still only one building, and that's what this team has been, and the school building committee has been considering for about the past year in terms of what to pursue in that regard. This is a timeline of the MSBA process and schedule. As you can see, the statement of interest was submitted in 2014 and 2015. MSBA invited East Hampton into the process. We submitted this preliminary design program in December of 2016, in other words, about 8-9 months ago. And, sorry? I don't think we have the capability.
We aren't able to do that, but it will be on the website, so you can see it very clearly on the website. In fact, it's on the website now, the district website at epsd.us, so that'll be a place where you can see it in more detail.
Anyway, just quickly, we submitted what the Massachusetts School Building Authority refers to as the preferred schematic report, or I should say we will be submitting the preferred schematic report in September, which identifies which building project of those 3 I just suggested, or 4, will be selected by the district to pursue further. Ultimately, that then will be approved by the MSBA Board of Trustees, actually in October, and then we will proceed from there with a more detailed design and cost estimates for ultimately, and this is important, for ultimately for you, the voters, to vote on then in May or June of next year, of 2018. And we're looking at probably a late May vote at this point in time for the project.
Mel, before I take this over, I'm going to ask Mel just to give a brief description of owner's project manager, because I'm not sure all of you understand what that is. I know I didn't when I first worked on the first building project. Just a little bit about what an owner's project manager is.
Sure. There are 2 consultants that the MSBA, actually the Commonwealth of Massachusetts requires, and that is an owner's project manager as well as a design team, the architect. Bert Gardner is here as your selected design team, Kalo and Bienick Associates. The owner's project manager basically becomes the districts or the cities hired staff, you might say, in terms of managing and planning and orchestrating your project for you, advising the school building committee and the superintendent and the mayor on the various MSBA processes, as well as advising them on construction issues. And we start actually at the very beginning. Once the statement of interest is approved by the MSBA and you're invited into the program, we, the OPM, Owner's Project Manager, is hired, and we follow the project all the way through until the project is closed out after construction and after move-in and punch list, all those kinds of things.
Thank you. So the next step that we took was a visioning process. This is, we had consultants from Kalo and Beanick come and work with us for 3 days. We had the mayor there, school department administrators, teachers, students, parents, community members. And this was an opportunity for the consultants to support us in developing a vision. What would our vision be for this for our schools? And at that point, we were looking in general at if we did one school building project, if we did a pre-K to 4, if we did the pre-K to 8. So those were great days. We came up with lots of good ideas. And out of that visioning process, we developed these priority goals. You can see some of the chart papers that were put up during the visioning process. Small school feel, large school pride. As we began to talk more and more about the different models that we might look at, the pre-K to 8 was the one that seemed to be the one that met our needs. But we knew that we had a concern, and we knew our community members would have a concern about keeping that small school feel that our buildings currently have. So this was an important part of our visioning process and one of our priority goals. The next was holistic and joyful learning. We knew that in a new facility we'd have many more opportunities for our students to do project-based learning, to have connections with green space if the building were put on the site where we currently are, and just many more opportunities to have a rich educational experience. Next, flexible and adaptable spaces. We wanted spaces where students could meet in small groups, where classrooms could get together to have projects that they worked on together, that individual students would have a special places where they could go and work on an individual project. So there would be much more flexibility and clearly many more spaces than we currently have in our buildings. Our buildings are all used to capacity now. We really have no extra room for any of these kinds of things. So this was a priority goal for us. And green spaces, as I mentioned earlier. Our elementary schools have paved play areas, and Whitebrook has a really wonderful connection to green areas, to the woods, to the fields. And we thought that if we could get a pre-K to 8 project and site it here on the Whitebrook site, we'd have many opportunities to enrich our curriculum with connections to nature. So we were very excited about that. The next thing that happens is that we have to do a what's called an educational program for each of the projects that we're considering. Educational program required by MSBA for each building project describes the current program, facility needs, and proposed program and design features. MSBA required an educational program for each option being considered. Maple School, that was one project. A consolidation of grades pre-K to 4, that would be a second project. And a consolidation of grades pre-K to 8. So a program had to be developed for each of those projects. The required components of each educational program are listed on this slide. And the purpose of the educational program is to inform the design response. The proposed educational programs were written using information gathered from the 3 visioning sessions. And once each educational program was completed, we worked with Bert Gardner, our designer from Kalo and Beanick, to develop a design response that met our educational objectives and needs for each of these options as determined by the visioning process. At the end of this lengthy and comprehensive process, all information was shared with the school building committee, and they determined the pre-K to 8 option was the option that best met all student needs and was most cost effective. So why a pre-K to 8 facility? Why was it a mutual decision of the school building committee and the people who worked on the visioning of the project that pre-K to 8 would be the project that would meet our needs? After the visioning and the process of defining our current educational programs in our schools and what we really needed in order to provide a 21st century education for our students, an education that will prepare our students to be college and career ready in the 21st century, it was clear that the pre-K to 8 solution was the only solution that provided equity of educational experience for all students in East Hampton. If we did just an elementary school, one elementary school, then we'd have elementary students and middle school students without the same opportunities. If we did just our elementary schools, our middle school students would not have the same opportunities. And we wanted to be sure that we had the same opportunities for all students. And we also discovered, and we'll be talking more about this later in the presentation, that it was the most cost-effective of the solutions. So what are the reasons the feasibility study convinced us the preferred design best met our educational program? This PowerPoint and slide are available on the district website, as I mentioned earlier, so I won't read all of the bulleted items. But some of the most compelling reasons for considering a pre-K to 8 solution are equity of educational experience that I mentioned a minute ago for all students in East Hampton, handicap accessibility in all buildings for all children. Currently, Maple School and Center School are not handicap accessible. Grade 5 will now become an elementary grade. This is something that many of our parents in the community have asked us and have wanted to have happen. Fewer transitions for students and families, and this model eliminates moving students from school to school to balance class sizes, which is what we've had to do in the past, move students from Maple School to Center School or Center School to Pepin School. Currently, we have a transition after preschool. After preschool, children have to be divided up and go to the kindergartens that are in our 3 elementary schools. We have another transition at 4th grade when our students go to Whitebrook, and then again another transition to the high school. So this would eliminate some of those transitions. We would have improved parking and access. I'm sure you all recognize the issues with parking and drop-off and pickup. And we'd have improved safety and improved food service with the new design. It also facilitates community building across all grade levels. When we presented our findings to MSBA, they agreed to allow us to pursue the pre-K to 8 solution. In fact, they were really very open and warmly accepting of the idea when we went in front of the board. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to Bert Gardner, and he's going to give you a look at some preliminary designs for this project.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, so there's a lot of information on this slide, but basically it's just a graphic representation of all the points that the superintendent just made on why we came to the decision that a pre-K to 8 school is the answer. So it reads like a stoplight. Red is stop, yellow is proceed, maybe with caution, green is go. As you see, the new pre-K to 8, kind of the third column from the left, is the only one that meets all of the criteria of the ed plans that came about as part of the visioning process. So we can move on to. So ultimately, looking at the pre-K to 8 solution and keeping in mind some of the priority goals that the district had, we designed the school as one building, but it's really designed as 2 separate schools that happen to be joined together and share resources of a gym, kitchen, and auditorium space. The yellow shaded portions are the elementary school, all the way to the left. They're broken down into 3 fingers, 2 stories each, and really what it does is each grade level will have their own classroom wing in the building to really kind of come back to the small community feeling of the elementary schools you've got now and to really build a sense of community. We've got separate entrances for the elementary school, the middle school, and the pre-K wing. Pre-kindergarten's got its own entrance and its own end of the kindergarten classroom wing. The red dot now is on a pre-kindergarten playground. Up above that, kind of the same color, is an outdoor playground for the elementary school kids. And then kind of on top of the purple in the back is an exercise circuit for middle school age kids. As you see in the design, the existing football field has been preserved. We've also stayed out of a lot of the environmentally sensitive areas of the site. While it's a large site and very open and great for academic purposes, there's a lot of wetlands and stream buffers and things that we have to kind of respect. Sure. Basically, the wetland buffers come all the way, almost and touch the school. We're really, really tight to those. But while those are constraints for the building, they're really great opportunities educationally. So we've got a good site out here. The purple, dark purple section over here is your middle school wing. That's actually organized as 3 separate stories. So again, each grade level will have its own floor or classroom wings, 6, 7, and 8. The gray areas in the middle would be a gymnasium, a kitchen, and then an auditorium out in the front. There's concern that losing the auditorium here at Whitebrook in gym space. We wanted to make sure that we tried to at least acknowledge that while there's some financial implications to having an auditorium at a middle school level, we're carrying it in the design so far. And the gym is actually sized the same as the high school gym right now, so that while we recognize Pepin would be closing, we'd be still respectful of tight gym space in the district. Some other moves that we made are just kind of the orientation. We made sure that it works well with passive solar strategies. We made sure that all classrooms have windows and views to the outside. Really, if we got into the details of it, there's a lot of variation in spaces and flexibility for classroom space, for group work right down to one-on-one instruction. I think that's pretty much it. We've got, for circulation, certainly improved over what your elementary schools are now. We've got an outside bus loop, and then the inside parking lots actually serve for parent drop-offs.
Could you just point out the footprint of the current Whitebrook on there?
Yeah, I'm going to go up to do it, though. and it's really difficult to see it the way this is shaded. It's in white, but we're in the auditorium, which is right about here. The pool comes out to here and kind of comes across the middle. The 7 and 8 wing is here. Then you go back around the 5th and 6th graders, and then the gym is out here. Actually, the gym is right here. So this corner is the only place that we overlap on the existing building with the new building, which is kind of part of the space behind your locker rooms here. There'd be some phasing issues, but ultimately those can be worked out so that we don't have to displace any students during the construction of the new building, which will save time and it will save money and just be a smoother transition for students as well.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some cost efficiencies that we believe that a pre-K through 8 consolidated program will result in for the district. Although it's hard to get terribly specific right now, we do believe that it will allow us to eliminate some staffing redundancies and that there'll be some personnel cost savings as a result. But I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail about the operational cost savings that we expect will result from a consolidated pre-K through 8 program. The first is food service savings. The way that the meals program works currently is that all meals for the 3 elementary schools and the middle schools are prepared here at Whitebrook, and then they're transported and served at the elementary schools. So we believe that there will be savings in probably staffing by having everybody on one site, and also that there will be savings relative to transporting those meals, both equipment to keep it hot and also the vehicle that transports it. We believe that there'll be preventative maintenance savings as a result. Right now, with as you can well imagine, with a 45-year-old 145-year-old building and 300-year-old buildings, the preventative maintenance costs are steep for all 4 buildings. In a new, modernized, state-of-the-art facility, the preventative maintenance costs should be less. We also believe that there will be emergency repair savings. Right now, again, because of the age of the buildings, the state of the buildings, emergency repairs crop up quite regularly. A good example of that is we had 2 boilers fail this past school year alone, one at Center School, one here at Whitebrook School. They were very steep repairs that had not been budgeted for, and those kinds of things crop up regularly. We believe that there are savings in equipment redundancy. Right now, because the 4 buildings are separate, there's equipment that we need to maintain the building that is repeated in every building. Carpet extractors and floor burnishers and snow blowers, all kinds of things. And if you're on one unified site, then you have one set of that equipment to serve the plant. We also believe that there are snow removal savings. That's an expense that's currently covered by the city. It's in the city budget, not in the school budget, but snow is removed from 4 different sites, and it would be a single site that would need to be covered in that regard. So there has to be savings there. And then finally, and maybe most significantly, we believe that there would be significant electricity and heating expense savings. If we go to the next slide, this is, there's a lot of information here, and I would encourage you to take a look at it on the website if you're interested in knowing those kind of details. But this gives a lot of information about the current consumption of fossil fuels and electricity in our schools. And I'll just highlight a few of the major points. On the top half, that's what's currently being used in our schools. As Superintendent Follansbee mentioned earlier, this building, the Whitebrook School, is the biggest energy hog in the city. If you look at on a per square foot basis, Pepin School uses an awful lot as well because it's smaller and on a per square foot basis uses quite a bit. On the bottom half of the screen, what we did was we tried to apply the savings that were realized by modernizing the high school to this new building, and what we anticipate is a savings in utilities of just under $124,000 a year as a result of modernizing the buildings and going with new energy efficient systems rather than the old outdated systems. I'll also mention that replacing the 4 schools by one consolidated building, we actually reduced the square footage that we're operating by 52,000 square feet. And we expect that there are other operating costs buried in that reduction that we haven't detailed here.
Thanks, Dale. Now, to give you a little bit of sense of the actual costs and comparisons of what the options are and what you'd be looking at in the future, if you took all the 4 schools that we're talking about, the 3 elementary schools as well as Whitebrook, and just did a repair and code compliance project for those 4 schools, not increasing it for really the square footage and the program needs that would be needed educationally, but just the repair and code compliance, those 4 buildings would total $115 million. As I mentioned earlier, MSBA will only participate in one building project at a time. So If you were to choose, and you could choose either one of any one of those buildings, although the only one that's been accepted right now is Maple Elementary School, unless you do a consolidated project. The likelihood is that you were chosen, East Hampton was chosen for the high school in 2010. You were fortunate enough to also be selected for the Maple School or consolidated school in 2014, which is a very unique opportunity in that MSBA doesn't give these grants out to the same district that often, particularly those of the size of East Hampton. So it's unlikely that if you were to just do improvements to Maple that you would be invited in the near future for a third project. So you'd still be left with Center Pepin and Whitebrook left unsupported by MSBA projects. As I mentioned, the repairs and code compliance improvements do not address the 21st century program issues that certainly the new building would address. And they do not meet, and it would not meet the MSBA space standards to support that program either. What a new pre-K to 8 school project would cost is $101 to $109 million. This is the range that we feel pretty comfortable that this pre-K to 8 project would cost, the one that Bert showed you. That range will get more focused and narrowed in further on our next phase of the work, which will be happening in the fall of this year. But if you combine that, or compare that 101 to 109 for the whole new facility, and compare it just to the repairs and code compliance for the 4 schools combined, it's $115 million. So it is actually cheaper to build a new school with all the program requirements and all the modern facilities than it is just to repair the four schools that you have currently. And the cost range for the East Hampton, once the MSBA grant has been realized, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $52 to $61 million. A little bit more than half, somewhere close to 50%, depending on what the details are of the project. So these are some of the preliminary cost assumptions and tax assumptions that can be drawn from this scenario. The total bond debt for the project of $61 million. I took the higher end of the slide that I just showed you. Assume these days what the experts are telling us, somewhere in about a 4% interest rate. This is much like a mortgage that East Hampton would be taking out on these projects, and the current reasonable rate is right around 4%. Again, much like a home mortgage, you have the choice of what your term of the mortgage would be. 20 to 30 years is pretty typical in these municipal bond markets. And then there are, again, not to repeat myself, but options, much like you would face if you're buying a home with a mortgage. You can choose different repayment plans. There's the one that's the flat principal, where you pay the same amount year after year after year toward the principal, but obviously the interest goes down as you pay more of that principal off during the debt. The second one would be a flat total payment. Frankly, most of us probably have this is the most common one, where you set the payment amount on a monthly basis or annual basis for the mortgage, and it runs that way, and as the years go on, more and more of that payment goes toward principal and less toward interest, and toward the end it's mostly principal. And then the third one is the variable principal payment plan, where the principal amount can be varied along the way, which is a bit of a combination of the first two, you might say. So these are variables that also affect the tax implications. How much you pay up, how much you pay in the early years versus how much you pay in the later years, and how long it takes you to pay it off, and that sort of stuff. All of those determinations are made by the mayor's office at the time of the debt and the bonding to determine what is the best deal that East Hampton can get in the bond market. Based on these assumptions, however, and choosing one of the more standard approaches to this is that you would end up with, you have an the average East Hampton home assessment is $228,400. So for each resident that owns an average house of $228,000 home assessment, the preliminary tax impact would be somewhere in the $2.98 to $3.83 per thousand. So you take that $228,000 and apply it to those dollars, and you end up with an annual tax impact for an average homeowner of between $680 and $875 a year on your tax bill. It's not cheap, but it's in the longest term, however, it is much less expensive than dealing with the 4 buildings individually. This is an important range, and it is a range because depending on which tax impact or tax plan, which bond plan is chosen, will affect those rates, those annual rates, and therefore it remains the range that we're talking about, even assuming the 4% is a fixed interest rate. Yeah, this based on our schedule that we're going through right now, we would start construction probably in 2019 or 2020. So therefore, the bond would not have to be taken out, or you wouldn't feel the tax impact until fiscal year 20 or 21. So this tax impact would be a couple years off yet, a couple to 3 years off before you'd really before it would really take effect if the project is approved. Okay. All right. So just talk briefly about some of the advantages to the new pre-K-8 school building now. You know, this is the solution that as Nancy and Dale and all have discussed, is that it's the only solution that really meets all the student needs. It doesn't address just Maple School and those students that go to Maple School and leave the other 3 schools as is. It doesn't leave Whitebrook out. It really collects them all under one building project. It is the most cost-effective solution over the long term, as I mentioned. It's that comparison of the between 101 and 109 million versus the 115 to basically just repair the 4 buildings. The MSBA reimbursement, you know, may not be available in the future. If this is turned down, or if you just choose, let's say, if East Hampton were to just choose the Maple option, there's no guarantee that MSBA would even support any of these projects in the future. As a matter of fact, it would be unlikely that it wouldn't be revisited in quite some time. As I mentioned, the pre-K to 8 solution does address all 4 outdated buildings at once. It's a really unique opportunity that we do a lot of these projects for various school districts throughout the Commonwealth. And you have the opportunity right now that you've replaced your high school, and this project would give you a completely new educational building facilities, you know, to last you for at least 50 years or more. Certainly the can has been kicked down the road a long time with the 100-year-old buildings. They've been maintained as well as they can be, and they're not bad old buildings, but they just don't satisfy the school needs any longer. Like I say, it provides the equity of educational program for families and students in all the grades. It affects the pre-K all the way through 8. It also avoids additional inflationary impact on project costs. We finished the high school in 2013 at $43.7 million. The estimated project cost for that same school in 2021, which is when we'd be opening this school, would be $60 million. So you can see there's almost well, there's $17 million just of inflation, and this obviously goes on, you know, as time goes on. So the longer it's postponed, the more those repair or replacement costs are going to go up. And the low-interest bonding is still currently available. Many of us in the room remember well the days when interest and mortgages were even double digits. So it's fairly reasonable. And I'm also pleased to say that the projects that we've been doing recently have continued to be under budget because the construction industry is still quite competitive as well. So it's a good time for East Hampton with the stars aligned if you can afford to pay it to take advantage of this one-time opportunity by the MSBA.
Thank you. So, of course, foremost for us always is our students. It's really about our students and providing that quality educational experience. And we look at that in terms of anticipated benefits to the community. We believe that this would also promote a strong community building by keeping our children and our families in our schools. Currently, we lose approximately $2 million every year to children choicing out using the Choice Out program or charter schools or attending charter schools. So $2 million leaves the city coffers, $2 million that could be used on other kinds of city services. We've started to turn that tide. We now currently have fewer children choicing out to other districts, and we have more children choicing into our district. East Hampton is becoming a destination school for parents who are looking for an alternative. And so what we did discover once the high school was built is that really was a big indicator in terms of turning around this choice out and choice in. We now have many students looking to choice into our high school and the many opportunities it provides for students. And we fully anticipate that would be the same situation that we would encounter once we were able to have a pre-K to 8 new facility. And once we were able to have a pre-K to 8 new facility, we would fully anticipate that we would start our students in our schools and they would stay in our schools. So there are many benefits to the community by approving this building project. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tom for next steps, and then we're going to have plenty of time for questions and answers.
Thanks. So as I said earlier, tonight is our third public forum in an effort to get as much information as possible out there. September 14th is our deadline, if you will, to submit our preferred solution. It is our intention at this point to submit the pre-K through 8 solution to MSBA. In the fall, shortly after that, we will hold another forum, date and time and place to be announced. We will meet with MSBA Facilities Assessment Committee September 20th or October 4th, and we would expect their approval on October 25th. Again, from everything we're being told, we'd have no reason to not expect MSBA's approval for this project. And then we have from October 25th through the potential vote date of late May of 18 to, again, continue to get out as much information as possible about the project. So with that, we would be happy to open it up for questions. I think we're just asking you to come up here to the podium so that we can pick you up on the microphone. Tonight's forum, as our last one, is being taped. Will be played on ECAT for those folks at home to be able to get all the information. Again, we want that information out there and try to answer every single question that's out there. So anyone has a question, come on up, ask your question. We think somebody in the house can answer it. Don't all rush.
We also would certainly welcome your input on this forum, or if you've attended other forums, if there are other things that you think that we can share with the community that would be helpful in having all members of the community understand the project. You know, we would welcome your thoughts and suggestions with that, on that.
Again, in our efforts to get the information out there, beginning in the fall and through the spring of next year, Deb Luznia, who's the current chair of the school committee, will be heading up a committee, a ballot question committee, if you will. The last time around for the high school, it was called Committee for Better Schools. And again, it's an effort to get the information out there in a more grassroots type of venue where we might have meetings in senior centers or libraries or wherever. But Deb will be putting that together. If anyone would like to help with that, many people have already signed on to assist with that process, whether it's mailings or surveys or whatever it might be. Again, to get information out there, you can contact Deb Luznia if you're interested in helping with that.
And we'll put that information on the website. If you go to our school website, www.epsd.us, you can just Google East Hampton Public Schools. There's a drop-down menu that is labeled School Building Project. There's some questions and answers there. If you have questions and you're not feeling comfortable coming up here to the podium, you can also stand at your seat, and we'll repeat your question so that it will be on the video. But you can also send me any questions you may have, and I'll reply to those, and we can post them for others to see as well. So my email address is on the website. It's nfollensby@epsd.us. So there are many ways for you to connect with us, to get your questions answered, and to let us know if you want to help us move this project forward. We'll have information on our website on all of that. Is a question? All right, thank you. Good, thank you. We appreciate that.
My name is Cindy Siborowski. I have a couple of students, well, one just graduated, so I have one student who's still in the high school. But I had a couple questions. My first question is, the new proposed building is supposed to have a shared gymnasium and shared cafeteria space. I'm wondering, since now we have K through 8 you're proposing, that's 9 grades all sharing gymnasium space. How will that work to accommodate all the kids? Will they be losing gym time?
No, that's a very good question. I'm going to let Bert talk a little bit about the design, because I think that will help.
So first, the gymnasium. Being sized at the same size as the high school, you can fit 3 teaching stations in it, which can have partitions to divide them out. So you could hold 3 gym classes per class period of the day. There was actually, in the early PDP, preliminary design program study, it was the first phase that we completed, a really in-depth look at how many gym classes you offer currently, how many you projected to have, and kind of a matrix laid out to ensure that we had enough space that you could offer gym classes to everyone without losing any gym time for students.
That's important.
Uh-huh.
That's really important.
And
even though I don't have kids that are going to be or benefit from the school, I know how important that is. So,
Right.
And as well with the cafeteria, because it's shared.
So I mentioned that there's
yeah,
a
how
shared
would that work?
kitchen, but we don't actually have a shared cafeteria. The middle school students have their own cafeteria, and that's set up to do 3 lunch periods. Actually, I think we set all of them up. We sized them all for 3 lunch periods was the decision that would be made. And then the elementary school has 2 cafeterias, so that we've got kind of distributed dining for the younger students. So there's no mix between middle school and elementary school kids for the cafeteria, and we've got plenty of space dispersed throughout the school to accommodate them.
Okay. And then I had a couple questions, just budget-wise. How confident are we on that proposal for the cost of the building? Because I know originally it was estimated to be somewhere around $150 million, and now it's come down a little bit. So how confident are we that it's going to stay within that and have that impact that you proposed?
Well, we're always want to be very conservative when we're putting out numbers. And the more we look at the project, the more definitive the project becomes, and therefore the more definitive the costs are. We started out with a much broader range, and the upper end of that range was in that $150 million number. Since then, Once this plan has been developed by Kalo and Beanick, we actually sent it out preliminarily to an independent cost estimating firm that has come back with this range now as we put it together into the total budget of this $101 to $109 million. We're very confident that we can make that work. We actually would like to bring it down if we possibly can. We've had great success in the past of containing our costs. The high school came in actually $3 or $4 million under budget from those numbers, and we're equally confident that we'll do the same with this.
Okay. And I have one more question, last one, I promise. You talked about additional cost savings by reducing staff redundancies, and there was the maintenance was going to be reduced. The proposed impact on the community, does that already take into consideration those cost savings, or would that trickle down and maybe reduce the impact later on?
I think the short answer to your question is that they've not been quantified or applied to the costs of the project at all yet. They would be savings on the operating budget side of things, but I think what it would mean is the school district potentially needing less to operate the school, and the city having more money to direct in other directions.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
One other thing in terms of the cost of the project, we currently have an auditorium built into the project, which is not reimbursable by the state. So there's some other decisions that we can make along the way if we feel that those are wise decisions to make, to eliminate some things that we currently have in the design, and that may lower the cost of the project. Thank you for your questions. Appreciate that. Other questions, concerns, thoughts? Oh, great. Thank you.
Last meeting I asked about the busing, if that was going to increase or not. Now, I was told the bus cost about $40,000 a year to operate. That's about what a teacher is.
That's conservative, yes.
For every bus you add, you subtract the teacher.
Well, it's not a black and white as that. We're still in such a preliminary stage that we can't say whether we're going to need more buses or not. We would still do the staggered busing that we do now, so that we can use the same buses to bus our elementary, middle, and high school students. That's a savings to us. I don't know if Dale's in charge of that, if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Well, we haven't gotten far enough down the road to predict what impact it will have on ridership. But I would say that the $40,000 a bus number might be a little low.
The other question is, you don't have a map with a circle on it at 1 mile and a map with 2 miles, and then you can just kind of figure out who's in between with busing costs?
We certainly have that map. We haven't analyzed the current student body relative to that map. Something that we need to do.
And the Maple Street project, but if that was an alternative, what would that come in just for Maple Street?
Well,
We've got that number. We do have the number. I don't know it offhand. Yeah, we do have that number because we did it in all the options. We don't have that information for you right now, but we could certainly get that. There's the other problem with that is, regardless of the price tag to that, which we will get, is that because the site is so restricted, we can't get all the space that we would need at the Maple site to satisfy the MSBA space standards for the building. But we'll have to just find out or get back to you on the number that was, because Kalo and Beanick did lay out a full design for the Maple School expansion and renovation, even though it didn't meet all the space standards, and we did apply dollars to that project. I just don't know what they are right offhand.
And the new school, how many elevators will it have?
2. Yeah, the middle school and the elementary school would each have its own elevator in the scheme that we showed.
Pretty pricey when it comes to maintenance.
I don't know that I don't know actually offhand maintenance costs for running the elevators. I don't know if you guys have a better handle on that with your budget. The elevators themselves, there's a cost to having 2 elevators rather than 1 elevator, but it really just works much better, and it helps keep the grade separations between middle and elementary.
You might say it's better than having an elevator at all 4 schools, obviously. So if you want to make them all accessible.
And I just want to add that in terms of the Maple project, the thing that we think is a real disadvantage there is that it is such a tight site that we don't have room to put any kind of grass playing area for elementary students. We just, or parking. I mean, it's not really going to solve the problems that we currently have, or many of them, or not all of them, clearly. Another question? Or you?
No, I could keep going.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Another question? Great, thank you. This is so helpful to us to hear your questions.
Broken your microphone. I was wondering if you thought about the intersection at the entrance to the middle school with the increased traffic. I live in the community right next door, and I noticed driving by in the morning that it's just a really challenging intersection, and I can only imagine it getting a lot more challenging with increased people having to go in there. I don't know if you've consulted with the town planning people about a stoplight or something, because I think that will have a big impact on that intersection.
Maybe you could answer how that.
Certainly not as yet. We haven't gotten to that level of detail. We do need to do the traffic concern, study those traffic concerns at that intersection. There's no question about that, and make sure we got another turning lane or something,
Yeah.
that satisfies that issue.
Okay, thank you. And I also just wanted to comment that I'm a new member to the East Hampton community, and I have a 2-year-old, so this is really exciting to me. I was really concerned about the public school conditions and considering alternative school options outside of East Hampton, and I really hope that this moves forward, because I think it's a great opportunity for kids in East Hampton. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, thoughts? Well, again, you have different ways that you can share your questions, your concerns, any thoughts that you may have with us online or phone calls. We'll give you as many opportunities to do that as we possibly can. We thank you so much for being here this evening. We hope that you'll share the information you learned this evening with family, friends, and neighbors. So thanks again for coming.